Alrighty, can you hear me all? Just give me a thumbs up if you can, please. All right, great. Yeah, so Teams struggles a bit when I share video with large numbers of folks, so I will not do that. So bear with me just a minute here. I want to make sure that our recording is in fact on the way. Yeah, and it is. All right, so I'm going to reshare my screen. Just give me a heads up that you can see my screen, and we will get this show on the road. All right. So, housekeeping, you know the rules. Let's keep it clean and friendly. I'll get the weekly email and a video link out shortly after the session. It'll be likely late tonight or early morning Central US time. But, and again, the resources I share here are going to be equally effective for the 2021 or 2024 version of the exam. That is the #1 FAQ I would say that I get nowadays is, should I wait and take the exam after April 15th, or should I take it now? And I think it comes down to a matter of whether or not you're ready. If you feel you're ready, there's no reason not to take it before April. And if you wait until after April, I'll provide a, let's call it a bridge video with just the extras that come in 2024, which are, as you've seen, relatively minor. I would say this exam is 97, 98% the same, with a few minor updates and then a handful of new topics, as you've seen. It's not a great deal different in many cases. So I don't want you to feel like preparing for 2021, if you decide that you just can't make it and you wait until April 16th or later, you're not losing a thing, my friends. So the other most common question I get, and I did receive a handful of technical questions from you all. Folks like to talk about practice exam questions and why one answer is right or not right, and I'm perfectly happy to have those discussions. Get a lot of questions about which practice quiz do I need, how often do I take these quizzes, what does that look like? And I can appreciate that when I describe to you a high-level methodology, maybe the nuts and bolts of exactly how you implement that are not crystal clear. So what I'd like to do is walk and talk you through how I prepared for the exam and how I would do it today if I were you, having the resources that are available to you, many of which were not available when I took the CISSP exam some years ago. So we are on Domain 3, Security Architecture and Engineering. Couple of minor changes here. In fact, there's a new section in this domain, although I don't think that section is of great consequence. But what I'm going to do, since I know it's late where some of you are, I think that bonus item there, just walking through my exam prep strategy, is something I'd like to do with you live here. So if you have questions, you can throw those out as I go through this, and we'll still drill down into Domain 3, but you'll know that you have the recordings to go back to at every turn. So what I want to do is just talk you through exam prep strategy, how I did it and how I do it today. Now bear in mind, I had 20 years of IT experience when I took the CISSP exam. I studied for 12 hours over the course of 2 weeks or so, and I walked in and took that exam. I took the linear exam, which was 250 questions. So you're going to be taking the CAT exam, most of you. So that's going to be 125 to 175 questions, or 100 to 150 if you wait for the 2024 update. So we had talked about the need to use multiple sources. The science tells us everybody benefits from mixing those media and exposing your brain to the information in new ways to solidify what you're going to remember. So multiple modalities. We want to use spaced repetition, so learning a topic and then coming back to it after a period of time is always a great idea. And wherever we can do that, we should absolutely do that. So when it comes to starting off, it's not just what you use, but it's how you use it. And what I mean by that is I suggest you use video, the copy of my PowerPoints, some live quiz with a partner if you have a partner, or maybe some flashcards, a practice exam, some reading. I've had folks grab all of these materials and then ask how to use them. And sometimes I feel like maybe we didn't get quite into enough detail. I had a student recently here, a candidate, who actually took over 1,000 practice questions at one sitting. That's not my intention for you. So we'll get into how to use these. So video content is good to get a broad sense of exam content and what you know. And the Exam Cram in particular is a great first stop to give you a nice broad overview in 8 hours or so. And it's a great resource to come back in the days before the exam, leading up to the exam, to give you some spot refresher for sure. So it's intended to be something you can consume in bits and pieces and multiple times over an extended period. But use all the resources you want to find out there. But video tends to be my preferred starting point over the book. You're going to get through more topics faster using video. That's the number one reason why. And I can also consume it anywhere. So PowerPoint review. When I was preparing for the exam, there was a little bit of YouTube content. In fact, there was a guy who's since taken his channel down, but he had about a 90-minute overview. And what his video gave me was a sense of how to prepare. And he didn't really have much for PowerPoint, so I wound up creating my own. In fact, the first version of the CISSP Exam Cram were the study notes I created for myself from that initial video. So basically, I've got the PDFs out here, and you can download these and look at these. And what I did was PDF. I just saved the PowerPoint to PDF and handed that PDF to my wife on an iPad, and she quizzed me. And what was great about that is if I got an answer right, she could ask the question a different way to see if I really knew it. And if I got the answer wrong, she could ask the question a different way. So that live quiz gives you a lot of flexibility. You will find those PDF downloads broken out by domain in the description below the video. So if you don't already have them, you can just go there and get them and download them and use them with my compliments. That's what they're there for, so you can review wherever you are. Maybe you're in a spot where video is not convenient. Can you book my wife to quiz us? Wouldn't that be fun? If she was getting paid by the hour, I bet she just might. Now, when it comes to the PDFs and the live quiz, it's great if you have a partner to do that. If you don't, still just sitting around and reviewing, over coffee in the morning or in bed at night, it's a great way to get some study time in without making a lot of noise, without getting a computer out. You can do it on an iPad. So worth doing. But that's really what I use it for, is a quiet review, and it allows me to pause and linger as needed, where the video doesn't make that so easy, right? Because if I wanted to pause and linger in the video, I'd have to pause, back up, replay. So I can spend a little more time on specific topics. Really handy in that respect. That live quiz, like I say, it's a substitute for flashcards. Now, when I prepared, there really weren't flashcards out there other than the bits and pieces I could get off of Quizlet. And I didn't like incomplete sets of flashcards, and I am not a fan of building my own flashcards for exams, and I'll tell you why. So number one, it is extremely time intensive. It's time that it would be better spent preparing in some other way. It will take, to create a comprehensive set of flashcards, it would take many days to do it comprehensively. Now, you have multiple options for flashcards, and I want to talk to you about where you can get flashcards. So if you haven't already, I recommend that official study guide in the practice test bundle, and you can register at wiley.com for the online resources. You'll see here I have the study guide and I have the practice test, And your first source of flashcards, which comes with your book, so when you go to the test bank, you'll find that you can launch a set of over 1,000 flashcards, which on its face sounds great. Now, what I don't like about the flashcards, what I like is you get 1,000 flashcards. What I don't like is you'll notice they're not broken out by domain. Basically, what you get here is you can look at all 1,020. You can look at unseen flashcards, and that's what it has, what the system has tracked that you haven't seen. I don't find that to be terribly accurate, to be honest. And then you'll notice that I can pick an amount, but look at the amount. I can only pick 250. So my struggle with what we get from the official study guide is that I can't easily break these up into smaller pieces. So we had talked about spaced repetition as an important learning tool, but also chunking, being able to carve my flashcards into smaller groups, but into specific topics as well. So the Learns app also has flashcards. So the Learns app has some flashcards. I will say that while they have 2,000 flashcards, they are fairly rudimentary. Let's say they've got a front and a back. You can't do a great deal with them, which I don't love. There's not an explanation there. There's typically a question and a short answer, and that's it. So I don't love them for that, but it's another source of a whole bunch of flashcards, and they also have a great deal of study questions, and this is, basically ISC Squared's official resource, and it's not too expensive. I think they're about $15 a month last I saw. And a few months ago, I decided that I wanted to build flashcards myself because I felt like there was something missing, and so I created the exam flashcards that you'll find from Inside Cloud and Security. And I did this for the specific reason that I wanted a curated set of flashcards. I wanted them divided into topics, so not just domains, but subjects. That's how the chunking works, right? If I need to study security models, for example, I can just come down and study security models, and I can focus exactly there. And one of the things I always wished for my flashcards that I didn't have was that it would give me a page number in the official study guide, or some additional reading, or a video I could go look at. I put exam tips in there where I can. I apologize that those flashcards are not free. If I didn't have developers and hosting costs, they would be. So I made them as inexpensive as possible. And there's a link to those as well out in the weekly email. But know that you have those 1,000 flashcards in the official study guide that you have in the online resources. You get some free access with the Learns app as well. Those flashcards just tend to be a little less robust and not so configurable is the downside. Now, practice exams. I want to talk about that for just a second here. So today you've got options for flashcards. That's great. I like curated flashcards over making your own just for saving time. And even if you go out to Quizlet, you'll find a few people who have created some flashcards for CISSP. So you might poke around there as well. Now I want to talk to you about the practice exams that are available to you, because this is a very important checkpoint for your knowledge. These should be small, they should be recurring, and they should be a measure of progress. And what I mean by that is, as you are preparing for exam day, this is how you will test your knowledge and find your weak areas. And we really want to be very prescriptive. For best results, I would say keep these checkpoints to an hour or less. I used to do half an hour or less when I could in exam prep, and I think shorter sessions are better. So in the official study guide, you get the quiz builder that gives you a bunch of questions. Now, when you do the questions that come with the book, I want to just break down some details for you here, okay? When you get into the book, you'll notice the book gives you 4 practice tests. That's great. It breaks the quizzes down by chapters. And you'll remember that the book, we have mappings of the chapters to the domains in the book. I'll show that to you again in a moment. It's available in the book. It's a little bit hard to find because the book is quite large, but I've got a slide that has that for you. So this is somewhat configurable, right? I can do some chunking here to get smaller quizzes, and I can target domains based on those chapter mappings. Yeah, 20, 30 questions at a time, Wasim. Absolutely the way to go. I saw somebody said you had trouble subscribing to flashcards. I'll ping you later and plug you in with somebody from development. We soft launched about 2 weeks ago. I haven't heard of anybody else having problems, but we'll get you covered. Now I want to talk to you about the other practice questions, and those come in the practice test book that comes with that bundle. And here's why those are important. When we talk about getting into your weak areas, when we get into the official practice test, you've got I want you to just see what they've done here. So rather than having book chapters, the practice test book is broken up into domains. Chapter 1 is domain 1, chapter 2 is domain 2. So if you are studying domain 2 this week, you can come to the official practice test in the test bank here, and you can take purely domain 2 questions. And you can carve it out to 20 or 30 questions if you like. So you can get a smaller set and you can be domain specific, right? That's why I like the practice test bundle, because they allow us to carve up the practice questions in a slightly different way. And you've got a ridiculous number of questions here, right? You've got basically 100 or so for each chapter, and then around, I want to say 500 or 600, around 500 for the practice test they give you. And I save these practice tests for the last mile. That's when you really want to be looking at practice test and taking a more holistic approach and do that. But I strongly recommend that. Now, could there be an engine that gives you better capability to carve these up into more specific question sets? Yes. And that's where you can go to third parties. I happen to like Pocket Prep, and I like them for a couple of reasons. So number one, they're fairly inexpensive. Number two, they allow me to carve things up in the way I like. So I can go in and it tracks my weakest subjects over time. So I can go into a weakest subject. I can do what they call quick tens. I can go back and retake missed questions. I can build my own. So if I want to build my own based on some of the questions I've already been through, not a bad deal. So I'm a fan of that. And here's the other thing I like about Pocket Prep. Great on mobile. So I just threw developer tools in. That's another thing with the flashcards that I built. I'm always annoyed when I can't do something on a phone. So we made flashcards that would work on a phone. But all of my resources, if I can get resources that work on a desktop, work on a phone, that's going to be my preference. Again, I don't think you need to buy anything third party if you've got that official study guide and practice test bundle. But when you step over into third party stuff for small dollars, by and large, you know, certainly in the low single digit or tens of dollars, you're getting really good resources and you're not spending $3,000 on a boot camp. And I think you're going to get equally good results, frankly. And so when I was using practice questions, that's exactly what I was doing, though, is going through, looking at some video, reviewing the PowerPoints and making notes into my own PowerPoints. I'm not a fan of making, you know, notebook mind maps. I created PowerPoints so I could later use it to help others. And when I take that practice exam, I said it's a checkpoint, right? It's going to tell me what I know, what I don't. And when I know what I don't know, that's such an important thing, not only for the CISSP exam, but in all of life. Know what you don't know. And so when I know what I don't know, that's when I'm going to go do some targeted reading. And I'm a big fan of targeted reading. But so you've seen my 2 cents on the practice exams, but just get some practice exams, starting with the official study guide, because that's cheap, because it's going to help you narrow your focus and you're going to save probably weeks. I do remember, I have a colleague who took this exam around the same time I did, and he and I both had around 20 years of experience. He might have had a little less. And I remember we met up at a conference and he had just passed maybe the week before I did. And I asked him, how long did you prepare? Expecting that he was going to have prepared somewhere around the same amount of time I had. His answer was 1.5 years. I prepared for 2 weeks. Now I had a lot of experience. My prep was a little shorter than most. He prepared for 1.5 years, and that's because the first thing he did was read the official study guide cover to cover. Please don't do that. And if you feel you need to do that, reach out to me and I will counsel you one-to-one until you're cured and you no longer believe you need to do that. We really want to get down to that Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, and spending 80% of our time on our weak areas. That's really what we've got to do. Think of your exam prep as a funnel, and we take everything that we're going to be tested on, and we want to filter down as quickly as possible to what it is we don't know. That's really the goal to doing this quickly and not wasting your time. So spend your time right there on what you need to focus on, the stuff you don't know. That's simple as that. And that's where the study guide comes in handy. Now, the official study guide exams, as I said, are 100% going to be enough. My bar for readiness for you is that you should be scoring more or less 90% consistently on those practice quizzes. So why 90%, do you ask? Well, the passing grade on the live exam is around 70%, but we know that those questions are going to be very cleverly worded. It's going to be a bit more complex, right? Practice quizzes are nowhere near that complex in their wording. They are intended to help you master the concepts. So if you've mastered the concepts, if you've mastered the domain knowledge to 90%, I think that gives you 20% wiggle room in working out clever wording on exam day. That's really what it comes down to. So targeted reading. So when I've taken those practice exams and I know what I don't know, I use that official study guide for two primary purposes. Learning more about my weak topics, number one. And number two, identifying the most likely exam topics. So Pete, how do you know what the most likely exam topics are? Well, there's my own personal filter, what I call the common sense filter. I know that on any exam, there's going to be a wide range of topics, and the exam will tend to focus on the most relevant topics. So, for example, they might ask me a question about Tempest, which was an attack on a CRT monitor, but I know that those old, tube monitors aren't around anymore, so I'm betting I'm probably not going to see a question on that. I'm going to focus on current topics, right? Things that are relevant today. For example, I know cloud is going to be more relevant on the 2024 exam than it was in 2021. I know quantum should likely get more attention. Here's that chapter to domain mappings, right? So for example, security and risk management's chapter 1 through 4, you'll see that security architecture and engineering is 6 through 10. So really, that's where you want to focus in the book if you were going to read something. So somebody had asked, had said, I'm weak in all areas. Does that mean I need to read the entire book? No, it does not. Use the materials I'm talking about in exactly the same way I mentioned. I expect that nobody is a blank slate, but you're going to learn something when you study video, right? You're going to learn something, but chunking. So like this week is domain 3. Focus your video watching and your PDF reviewing and your practice quizzes on domain 3. And when you do your targeted reading, you're going to be in chapter 6 through 10. Simple as that. But keep the mapping of domains to book chapters handy. Just keep that on hand so you've always got it and you know where you need to focus. Now, that second use of the practice quiz of the official study guide I just mentioned to you, finding the likely exam topics. Okay. And this is wrapping this up, okay? And if you hear nothing else tonight, I hope the last 15, 20 minutes here have been useful. Pay special attention to this. When you go to the book, every chapter in the book, every chapter without exception, has a little section at the end called Exam Essentials, which are recaps of likely exam topics. Think high probability topics, which is why when I create exam cram videos, I try to make sure that I cover the exam essentials. I like to think I did a pretty good job in 2021. I will do a better job in the 2024 version of the exam. But that's great for you because you can go back there and get a quick recap of likely exam topics. And for Domain 3, for example, chapters 6 through 10, if you wanted to do something fast, if you wanted to be agile, to steal a word from the world of project management, go to the exam essentials section of chapters 6 through 10 and read those 2 or 3 pages. Start there. Because those exam essentials are a recap, right? And especially if you are not very, technically very deep yet, the exam essentials are a nice level 100 toe in the water. It's giving you some key concepts-ish in that recap, and that might be a great place to start. So, Rebecca, you mentioned you're a PM. Reading these exam essentials as some spot knowledge before you move on to the next domain. That's a great way to just get comfortable with likely exam topics. But that is how I did it, my friends. And last thing, and this is another very common question. This falls into the FAQs category. I've had a lot of people ask me when they should take the exam. Should I take it before April or April 15th or after April 15th? And my answer is the same, okay? Take the exam when you are ready, which means do not schedule the exam until you are ready. When are you ready? Well, when you've mastered the content and you're seeing 90%, give or take, consistently on those practice quizzes, that's a pretty good sign you're ready. Now, do you need what do they call the second quiz free, the retake, the peace of mind guarantee you can pay for? If you insist, if you're one of those folks who prepares better under pressure by scheduling the exam and forcing yourself to meet a deadline, I get it. And that's great. If that's what works for you, do it. And if you're one of those people that schedules and gives yourself that deadline to force your hand, then yes, the reassurance. I absolutely recommend you pay for that reassurance, because if you fail that first time, we know that exam is quite expensive, right? And if you're scheduling and you're forcing yourself into a test date, you might fail. And that being said, what you're going to learn in that first exam sitting is you'll have a better idea of how they ask the questions, and you'll have a better idea of what you didn't know, because I expect when you look at a question and you definitely know the answer, that's going to be pretty clear to you. And when you look at a question and you don't have a clue, that is also going to be informative of a topic that you'll need to take some time to prepare for a bit later. So that's how we do it, by the reassurance if you really need it for exam day. It's as simple as that. And if you need it, get it. If you don't bother. And that's how I feel about it. But that's how I prepared for the exam, for better or worse. So hopefully that gives you a bit more clarity. I want to just pop into domain 3 and do a bit of drill down. So I just had somebody ping me privately here. So if you don't know where to ask me a question, I have a link to a web form where you can ping me on the weekly recap email. And that form is nice because I give you a way to attach screenshots and the like if you wish, so you can be a little more robust in your asking of questions. So I'll just remind you to look at the weekly email and grab it from there. There's just a little bit.ly link. All right, so let's talk about the official syllabus for Domain 3. So here's the exam outline, and what I'm going to tell you is the exam outline for Domain 3 between 2021 and the 2024 versions of the exam. Very, very similar. So 3.1, research, implement, and manage engineering processes using secure design principles. So there's a laundry list of secure design principles. Security models, fundamental concepts of security models. These really trip folks up. I believe I cover security models in a way that's easier to understand than anyone. And in my 2024 content, I've even got a couple of extra slides to kind of do some additional chunking for you. They'll be available for you in the download this week as well. All of this was 2021 exam material as well, and still in 2024. And we're looking at the 2024 outline here, by the way. 3.3, select controls based on system security requirements, understand security capabilities of info systems, and assess and mitigate vulnerabilities of security architectures, designs, and solution elements. The only thing that's different in 3.1 through 3.5 here, there's one small item. I'm going to show it to you right now. We're going to pop over and have a look at the 2024 exam syllabus. I'm going to go to 3.1. I'm going to zoom in here. The only thing that is different is 3.1.11, Secure Access Service Edge, a newer technology / concept, so wasn't in the 2021 version of the exam. Not a big topic, minor change. Small addition, that's it. All right, to round out 3.1, select and determine cryptographic solutions, understand methods of cryptanalytic attacks, apply security principles in site and facility design, design site and facility security controls. Okay, remember I mentioned that I use my common sense, and it tells me that modern, very high frequency topics in today's world are going to be more likely to appear on the exam. I believe that very much to be true. What I will say in looking at 3.8 and 3.9, I believe site and facility design were likely a niche topic for most people 3 years ago. And I would say it's even more so these days. Raise your hand if you've designed and secured a physical data center. I'm betting it's not a majority of us out there. And in the world of cloud, where your public cloud is everywhere, I think it's all the more common, right? It's all the more common that we haven't designed a physical data center. I have because of my advanced age, but you still need to learn these. And I'll tell you, I had quite a few site and facility design questions on the exam. That security models topic that I mentioned, which many people find challenging and esoteric, I had several security models questions on the exam. Now, bear in mind also that the exam you're taking is an adaptive exam, right? And it's always trying to give you a 50-50 shot of getting a question right or wrong. If you miss a question, expect that you might get more questions. If you knock one out of the park, expect you might not, that it will go on to the next thing. It doesn't mean you don't need to know certain topics, because you may walk in there and only get one question, and it may be because you knew that subject quite well and they asked you a difficult question and said, oh, this candidate knows that topic. Let's move on to the next thing. All right. 3.10, manage the information system lifecycle. New in 2024. So what's new in Domain 3 in 2024? The information system lifecycle, which is a whole new section, okay? And what's going on there? But that section is really talking about lifecycle management throughout the design and implementation process. This is going to be, I think, pretty common sense material, and certainly touched on in other domains here where we're talking about things like disposal of assets. where we're talking about security in the data lifecycle. And then I mentioned the other thing that was new was that single topic, right? Secure Access Service Edge, that very small addition in 3.1.11. So even though there are a lot of lines on the page here, there's not a great deal that is functionally different than what we had in in today's version of the exam. So everything you study for the exam before April 15th absolutely carries forward. You're just going to have a handful of new topics that you need to worry about. So I want to jump into 3.1.1 with you. We'll jump into there, which has, and I'm going to just pull my slides over here so we can go through these a little more quickly, because these are not rocket science, but I do want to kind of expand this section and cover a few things. So what you'll find here in those design concepts, threat modeling, which we talked about a couple of weeks ago, defense in depth, a pretty well-known topic, secure defaults, meaning that the defaults of the system are secure out of the box, pretty common that we would want that. Failing securely. Keep it simple. And there's actually a small change in 2024. In the current exam, it was keep it simple. In 2024, they added the and small on there. Functionally, it means nothing. They just added that clever little bit, and I think perhaps they did it because the CISSP principle has two S's, and when I was a kid, the KISS principle was keep it simple, stupid, but we don't use that word anymore. So they were being nice, I think. I think is exactly the way to put it. Zero trust and trust but verify. So zero trust, not an uncommon topic on many exams. We see zero trust covered just about anywhere, and trust but verify is really kind of a legacy concept now, because trust but verify depended on an initial authentication process and basically then some generic access control due to changes in the threat landscape that no longer is considered good enough. But you've got a laundry list of these sort of design principles. I suggest you make sure that you are familiar with the core cloud models here. So in 356, let's just throw this on the screen. Cloud is worth just actually spending a little bit of time on here, because this is really common fodder today, and I think very important in the grand scheme of things. So in the shared responsibility model, we have IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS, which is what they're calling out in 356. So you'll want to know what you're responsible for and what you're not, generally speaking. So in IaaS, basically the CSP provides some building blocks. They handle, networking, storage, compute. It's all them managing, right? They have staff in the data center. They've got the hardware. They're handling all of the heavy lifting. The key benefits here are that our usage is metered, right? We're paying for what we use. We can scale up, out, down quite easily. We're reducing our spending on any sort of energy and cooling cost because it's no longer our problem, right? We are transferring that responsibility and some of that risk as well. Some common IaaS services: Azure Virtual Machines, Amazon EC2, Google Cloud Platforms, Compute Engine. Those are all virtual machines. That's IaaS. So if you're not terribly familiar with cloud, IaaS means VMs, basically. You want to know platform as a service? Now, with platform as a service, you'll notice here the gray area is everything that the cloud service provider owns, right? Google, Microsoft, Amazon. So you're handing more responsibility to them. They manage provisioning, Configuration, hardware, you're really responsible for deploying and managing your app. That's all there is to it. It's much less responsibility. So they handle core infrastructure updates. It gives us the ability to collaborate more easily, and we can run multiple languages seamlessly. In the PaaS world, we find broad support for a variety of programming languages. If I just look at the Microsoft world, they have Azure App Service where I can throw web apps. They have API management where I can throw my web services, my RESTful web services. Azure SQL Database, a PaaS database service, and AWS and Google Cloud Platform have functional equivalents of all those. And then we have SaaS, where basically we just configure the features, and that light blue up there, that's the shared responsibility. We have some shared responsibility around application access configuration and around our data. So really, really easy in that respect. Wasim actually made a comment here that the storage account is technically PaaS as well. Yeah, it kind of is. It's a good observation. But in the PaaS world, we do, or in the SaaS world rather, we still, as a customer, have some responsibility in access management and data recovery. So a few examples of SaaS. We'll take a look at those. But really, with SaaS, the bar for entry is very low. We don't have to have a lot of skills because all we have to do is more or less use the application. So if they've built a SaaS service that's easy for us to use, if it's intuitive, we should be able to get in there and get it done. Office 365, ServiceNow, Salesforce, all everyday examples of software as a service. I bring these up. That's 3.5.6, and I think that's going to be a fairly important topic, just cloud on the whole. Now, I want to touch on security models. I'm going to backtrack here, and I'm going to 3.2, which is security models, the same in both versions of the exam. This is an area where I find folks get confused pretty quickly because security models are nothing any of us have dealt with in our day-to-day IT life. And many folks have never heard of a security model before they walk in to take the CISSP exam. So a security model is used to determine how security will be implemented. What subjects can access a system and what objects they have access to. So subjects and objects, think of subjects as people accessing objects, which are resources. A subject could technically also be a system or an application accessing an object, a resource being, for example, data. So basically the security model maps us from our policy all the way down to the back end. These are a way to formalize our security policy. Technically, they're implemented by enforcing integrity, confidentiality, or other controls. Most of your security models enforce integrity or confidentiality. Each of these models lays out broad guidelines. They're not specific in nature. And it's up to the developer to decide how these models will be used and integrated into specific designs. So everything you're going to see here, I cover in the recorded version of this this video. I do want to just briefly show you a handful of things here to point a couple of things out. Okay. So as you're coming through these security models, understand what a security model is. I've got 2 or 3 slides here where I'm just trying to really drill down to exactly what the heck it is. Make sure you know what a security model is. Make sure you know what a subject and an object are. A subject is a person or a system or an application accessing resources, which are the objects. You'll look at a few models, the state machine model, the information flow model, and the non-interference model. Now, what I want you to notice here is these are basically model types, and you'll notice that these map to more specific models. Like the information flow model is a type that maps to Biba and Bell-LaPadula are both information flow models. And there's objects and subjects. You'll want to know the security model operations, the simple security property, which defines read, the invocation property, which gives us rules around calls, and then the star property, which is write. So no simple property, which is read, star, which is write, and then the invocation property. But you'll want to know those three properties. And the models that come up on the exam. So I broke them down here by integrity and confidentiality. I've got Bell-LaPadula in here now. For security models, since these are a bit esoteric, I like to try to provide some memory aids. So I've made some mnemonics for these. So like Bell-LaPadula, no read up, no write down is the rule there. And so what that means is when we say no read up, no write down, it means the user cannot read higher classification. So if I am allowed the confidential level classification, I cannot read top secret material. And no write down means that a subject, another person who has top secret access, for example, cannot down classify data so I can read it down at the confidential level. Domain 3 is, as somebody just said, it's a lot of information, and security models are one of the big chunks of this, and I recommend that you know these reasonably well. The Bell-LaPadula model, by the by, is really the one of the lot that is largely focused on the government. It's federal government where we would see that used, Department of Defense and the like. We have Clark-Wilson, which is home of the access control triple, or what you will now see called the access control triplet. So when you look for Clark-Wilson, if you see that phrase access control triple or access control triplet, they're talking about Clark-Wilson. I actually explain that at length in the video so you know what you're dealing with there. But no security models well for the exam. And I cover those in the official, the full course. I also cover those in my Exam Cram playlist in the processes, models, and frameworks. So if you were to look at the processes, models, and frameworks, you'd see them in there. You'll see a slightly newer version of the coverage in the full course, but it's fairly similar. You can find your way to a chunk so you can focus on just that. Any way you slice it. So know that it's out there. I'm going to jump down to 3.4 is actually fairly small, so I'm not going to waste any time there. I want to jump down to 3.6, where we're talking about some cryptography. And cryptography, as you can imagine, is important on an exam of this nature. It's a security exam, so I will recommend that you know the basics of public and private key cryptography. Bear with me here. I'm just going to hop around so I can show you something specific here. I'm jumping back to 3.4, where we get our introduction, the first mention of encryption and decryption. So encryption and decryption, we've got symmetric encryption and asymmetric encryption. You want to know the difference between these two, and you want to know not only the difference in how each of them works, you want to know how they are used for the exam. I cover all of that here in the full course. I have a breakout video on cryptography. So if you get into bear with me here, I'm just trying to actually find it for you. Got too many videos here. So there it is, the cryptography drill down. You can get through all of the guts of cryptography, symmetric, asymmetric, hashing, how they're used, common cryptographic algorithms. Are they in use today or not? What's symmetric, what's not? How does each of those work? It's all covered in about 35 minutes there if you need a specific drill down. So know that it's out there for you. And that being said, let's jump in and have a look at public key cryptography, also known as asymmetric encryption. So public key infrastructure is how we implement public key cryptography. So you have systems, servers really, called certificate authorities that generate digital certificates that have public keys and private keys. And users can distribute certificates to people with whom they want to communicate. The certificate recipient can verify a certificate using the public key. Certs are used for web, network, and some email security, just to name a few uses. There's a lot more, but I want to talk to you about the key pair here. So the important point in asymmetric cryptography is that we're using a public-private key pair. So we have Franco and Maria. So Franco wants to communicate securely with Maria, so he requests her public key. Maria sends her public key to Franco. Franco uses Maria's public key to encrypt the message, and he sends it to her. And Maria uses her private key to decrypt the message. So why is that definitely secure? Well, because Maria's private key is private. She has not and will not share that with anyone. So with that key pair, as long as the private key remains private, then we have an assurance of confidentiality there and good security. But to recap it, we've got the public keys, which are shared amongst the communicating parties. The private keys are kept secret, always. So public keys shared, private keys kept secret. So when you're encrypting a message for another party, you're always using their public key because that's the only key they're going to share with you. So when I think about the use of asymmetric encryption in these key pairs, in the world of data, we're using the recipient's public key to encrypt a message. You can decrypt a message that you're receiving using your own private key. Digital signatures use key pairs. So we can sign a message with our own private key. The recipient of a message can validate using the sender's public key. So each party in the scenario has both a private key and a public key, but they're only sharing the public key. And so because of that key pair where one always remains private, it's really easy to scale that up to many parties. Now, symmetric encryption, by comparison, is using a single shared key. So that's going to be much more difficult for us to share that key because we have to transmit it securely. What's a good way to share a shared symmetric key with other parties? Well, I can use public key cryptography, a public-private key pair. And going back to the Franco-Maria example, the payload that I'm sharing here might well be a shared key that I'm using for bulk encryption with a symmetric algorithm like AES. So you're going to want to be very familiar there across the board. Now, I'm going to just pull this over and I'm going to just caution you here on algorithms, okay? So I have definitely gone through the chunking exercise here to break algorithms into manageable chunks so you can memorize these. So I'm calling out here symmetric algorithms, and you'll notice I'm trying to highlight where algorithms have the same block size or maybe the same key length. You'll notice I'm calling out also what they're replaced by. Are they still in use? So here's hashing algorithms. So a hashing algorithm is different from an encryption algorithm in that encryption is reversible. So when I create a hash like a hash of my password, it's not reversible. And so once a hashing algorithm is compromised, the community moves on pretty quickly to something more secure. And I've tried to break these into chunks so you'll remember them, but what I will tell you is when I took this exam, I was warned that I was going to see many questions on this. I didn't see many questions on these. I would say I probably had, I could count them on one hand, I bet. And you'll hear me mention this in the lecture when I'm talking about this in the exam cram in the recorded version. I'm breaking these into chunks. So we talk about symmetric algorithms as a chunk. I call out skipjack and twofish down here. And I remember these because skipjack is a fish and twofish has fish in the name, right? A skipjack is actually a tuna. I only know that because I live down near the Gulf Coast. And twofish has a block size that's twice that of skipjack. And the questions that I received were fairly technical questions too. I think I did have a question around block size on something. Yeah, the complete course, yeah, I'm talking about what I'm talking about is at the top of that playlist, CISSP Exam Cram full course. That's it. It's 8 hours long. But yeah, that's it. But what I would tell you is don't spend forever learning these. Learn these as best you can. I've tried to chunk these out so you can learn them in bits. The hash algorithms versus symmetric versus public key. But don't get crazy with it because it's just like I say, the common feedback I'm hearing from folks is they're not getting a lot of questions on these, and I also did not see a lot of questions on these. What I will also say, you're going to see attacks of different kinds mentioned throughout the course. Application attacks, brute force attacks, denial of service attacks, which are a class of attacks. You not only want to know how an attack works more or less, like brute force attacks, for example, there are a variety of brute force attacks. They are disruptive attacks intended to disrupt access to a system. And you have denial of service attacks, you have distributed denial of service attacks. But what you should know as you're going through the 8 domains, not only the attacks, but know the countermeasures that will prevent those attacks. There's a video out there in the playlist, in the Exam Cram playlist, where I cover attacks and the countermeasures. Now, I mention this because I noticed there was, in the 2021 version of the syllabus, they mentioned the word countermeasure in one of the line items, and that same line item is nearly identical in 2024. They changed the name a bit, but I'm here to tell you just because they removed the word countermeasure, they still expect that you will be familiar with those countermeasures. So please be familiar with those countermeasures. Okay, I'm going to just drop that full playlist link right here so you've got them, so you know what I'm yapping about. But because there was a minor change in the syllabus, I think there is no functional change in how you are expected to prepare. You want to make sure that you are fully prepared for not only the attacks, but also the countermeasures you would use to prevent those attacks in one way or another. Now, I want to talk to you about quantum. So if you were to look at the official study guide for quantum, it's going to tell you something along the lines of, quantum computers aren't a thing yet, so there's not a lot that they're expecting you will need to know, right? That is slowly changing. We are seeing, quantum systems make it into the world. So what I do expect to be an even more popular topic on the 2024 version of the exam is what's called post-quantum cryptography. So I want to talk to you about that at some length today, because I want to point out the key items you should remember for the exam, and then I'm going to give you a little update at the end of this section to tell you something that has changed in the world since that 2021 syllabus. So, when the development of new kinds of cryptographic approaches that are implemented using today's conventional computers, but are impervious, resistant, that is, to tomorrow's quantum computers, that's what post-quantum cryptography is about. It's making the computers of today and the cryptographic algorithms that we use in combination to be something that is impervious, that is resistant to quantum computers, what we call quantum resistant algorithms. So which are susceptible and which are resistant? I want to just talk to you about that right now. So we have symmetric shared key cryptography. When I think about shared key cryptography, I think about AES, which is kind of the industry standard for bulk encryption, for symmetric encryption. And then there's asymmetric, also known as public key cryptography. So symmetric encryption is fast. It's for bulk encryption of data. Asymmetric is how we exchange keys. We do digital signatures. So I can actually remember, I can use asymmetric cryptography to encrypt and share my symmetric key. So what we find in the world is symmetric, when it's done right, holds up fairly well to quantum computing. And that means that I am picking an algorithm that is quantum resistant, and I am picking a key length that is also appropriate. So AES, for example, I could use a 128 bit key. I could also use a 256. And in today's world, AES 256 is where it's at. It's going to be quantum resistant. Asymmetric poses more immediate threats, for sure. So let's talk about symmetric for just a moment, okay? So Grover's algorithm shows us that quantum computer speeds up attacks to effectively have the key length. This means that a 256-bit key is as strong against a quantum computer as a 128-bit key is against a conventional computer. So what does that mean? Well, pay attention to the math with me here, okay? Doubling the key length from 128 to 256 doesn't make it twice as strong. It makes it 2 to the 128th times as strong, okay? So it's a big jump, mathematically speaking. And then we've got asymmetric. And here, Shor's algorithm can easily break all of the commonly used public key algorithms based on factoring and discrete logarithm problems. This means RSA is vulnerable. It means elliptic curve is vulnerable. When you go through the full domain 3 content and you get into the guts of cryptography, I do talk about RSA and elliptic curve. Lattice, though, offers some resistance, which is, generally speaking, good news. Lattice offers us some resistance to quantum computers. So Lattice is based on something different. It's based on a different type of problem. It's based on the shortest vector problem and the closest vector problem. It potentially enables us to replace essentially all of our currently endangered encryption schemes. And lattice-based cryptographic schemes make up the lion's share of scientific publications on post-quantum cryptography. Now, I'll say two things here, okay? Number one, the research selection, bear with me here. Teams is getting in my way. To just, yeah, Teams is not gonna cooperate. So research is ongoing, but what is true today is the research has come a bit further. So NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, some years ago began a search for quantum resistant algorithms. And I would have predicted for you 5-6 years, it's been at least 5 or 6 years ago. It all kind of runs together. I would have predicted for you that the algorithms they were going to choose would be lattice based. And they have made some selections. They did that a few months ago now. And most of those candidates that they picked in their finals were lattice based. That's really what it was all about. And you can read more about that at NIST. I thought I would drop you a link in the follow-up email just so you can see it. But this is one of those topics where it may change ever so slightly in the 2024 version because the world has come forward. You know, it's a new world and things have changed just a bit. Bear with me 2 seconds here. So expect that it may be a little different when you get to the 2024 version of the exam. So though I mentioned lattice, what exactly is a lattice? It's a three-dimensional array. That's a lattice right there. If you're interested in knowing that. But for the exam, remember two things first and foremost. So pop quiz. Which type of cryptography is more susceptible to quantum computers? Which is weaker when it comes to quantum? Is it symmetric or asymmetric? Anybody remember? Throw it in the chat. You had a 50-50 chance. Robert got it. Yeah, asymmetric. Symmetric cryptography is fairly resistant. Asymmetric cryptography is more susceptible. So remember that for the exam, but also for the exam, if you see a question asking for which types of asymmetric algorithms are going to be more likely be quantum resistant, the answer will be lattice, without a doubt. So bear that in mind. You do not need to be a quantum computing expert, but those are the key pieces. In my drill down on cryptography, I actually have a link over to a YouTube channel, a video on a YouTube channel. Her channel is called Up and Atom, spelled ATOM, and she has a short video where she actually walks through how quantum algorithms work. I don't expect there will be a lot of coverage of quantum algorithms on the exam. There may be some. I'm going to include that link in the recap email because I mentioned it over in one of the live videos, and it's worth watching the video. She's really entertaining, and it's worth understanding why quantum algorithms are so much better, frankly. So I want to go back to the syllabus here for just a moment and look at what else we have in domain 3. So in 3.7, you'll see understand the methods of cryptanalytic attacks, and there's a laundry list of attacks here. Looking at all of these were all covered in the 2021 version of the exam as well. You'll simply want to make sure that you kind of commit how these attacks work to memory, because the way the exam content breaks down attacks, they're broken down into different categories. So you'll see some attacks mentioned in domain 3. You'll see some mentioned in domain 5 when we talk about identity. You'll see some mentioned in domain 8 when we talk about secure application development and the secure development lifecycle. So what I've done, in the interest of chunking, is tried to put all of those attacks and countermeasures into a single source. That's this video right here. It's a hair over half an hour long. If you find this is an area where you just want to get in and remember the attacks and how you prevent those attacks, how you defend against them, because that's going to be the key pairing there. Okay. Digital signatures mentioned in 3.6.5. Digital signatures are an everyday technology. These are used by all of us every day. You should know digital signatures conceptually pretty well. So just going by the 2021 material, digital signatures rely on public key cryptography and hashing functions. There are 3 approved encryption algorithms according to the 2021 version of the exam. So there's DSA, RSA, and an elliptic curve DSA algorithm. So I have one footnote for you here. I am predicting something for the 2024 exam, and that is at the time the official study guide was written for this exam for 2021, FIPS 186-4 was the current standard. 186-5 was in some stage of review. As of last February, FIPS 186-5 is now the latest and greatest. So I expect we'll see the material updated to reflect that if you take the exam after April. So the one thing I would say you'll want to remember when it comes to digital signatures that's going to be different if you're waiting until after April 15 is FIPS 186-5 is a thing. So if you see that, don't be fooled into thinking that maybe that is a wrong answer, because it's absolutely the correct answer. So something I wanted to talk to you about here that I mentioned is a rough area because it's not part of most of our daily lives, myself included. I went through a data center rebuild, so a site design where we had to pick a building, and we had to design the data center from the ground up. So I want to talk to you about site design. So I'm just looking at my 2024 notes here that I'm putting together. So I've called out site design and physical. Really, we focus a lot on physical security when it comes to site selection and facility design and security. So for site selection, pretty common sense. It's not common sense until you've heard it, once. But when you think about it, if I'm picking a site for my data center, I want to make sure that I have good visibility. I want to make sure that I can see where threats are coming. I want to make sure that my facility will not be too low so as to be susceptible to flooding. I don't want to be near many very large trees where it might, I might have a tree fall on me. I need it to be close to a McDonald's so I can eat. I got to eat. That is not true, but it's funny. The same. Thank you, Christian. But if there's food in the neighborhood, that's a plus. I'm gonna do that, right? Because my staff has to eat also, right? So it's gonna help me retain staff. For facility design, I need to understand the level of security that's needed, and I need to plan for it before construction begins. For the exam, there is one very simple phrase I want you to remember. There is no security without physical security. I'm gonna pop down here and just put it front and center on the screen. And what do I mean by that? Well, think about a wiring closet, okay? So wiring closet is one of the topics mentioned in section 3.7 when they're talking about the more physical aspects of security. Or so when we think about a wiring closet, I say 3.7, I think it's a little bit further along, but think about a wiring closet, and bear with me, I'm just popping around here to get to where I wanted to show you, and I don't see it. But with regards to physical security, if somebody can get into my restricted area, for example, if they can open the door on my wiring closet, what logical security, what technical controls can I put in place that will protect me if you can open the door to my wiring closet? Not a lot. If you get access to my wires, you can grab them and start yanking. The same holds true in handling visitors in a secure facility. If a facility employs restricted areas to control physical security, then a mechanism to handle visitors is going to be necessary. We use escorts for visitors. We want tracking action, so that can be a sign-in sheet at the front desk. That can be closed circuit cameras that follow these folks throughout our environment. We can have a badge on those folks, and we can use RFID badges to track their movement throughout our facility. So access is a layered approach, and you'll want to be familiar with the different types of security control. So when we think about the functional order of security, we want to deter bad behavior, How do I do that? Well, let's think about a facility, okay? You come up to the gate on my facility, and I have a no trespassing sign on my gate. That's a deterrence, right? Another psychological deterrence is with my gate. Even if my gate is open, it's been proven that if your gate has a little roof over it, think of a pipe gate that you see on a ranch. When you go to a ranch out here in Texas, where I live, the gates will often be made of pipes, and the ranch's sign will be above the gate. So just going through that entry where I see the sign, that's a psychological deterrent because it's clear to me I'm going into somebody's property. Guard dogs are a deterrent. Now, security controls can fall into multiple categories. So a sign is just a deterrent. Having a gate that is unlocked is a deterrent. Now, when I lock that gate, that's denying, right? So if deterrence fails, if somebody still tries to misbehave, like for example, if we look at our fencing. So I mentioned in physical security controls for a site here, basically the categories of fence. So to deter a what we call a determined intruder, you need an 8-foot fence with barbed wire. A 6-foot fence will deter somebody who's not too determined, but most folks can scale a 6 or 7-foot fence. 8 foot with barbed wire does the trick. That's going to deny access. That's going to be a hard denial for sure. Now, what happens if denial doesn't work? Well, if denial doesn't work, then I want to be able to detect activity. So go back to my scenario where I said at the front gate or at the front desk, I want to assign an escort to visitors, and I might use closed circuit television. Well, closed circuit television is going to be a detective mechanism potentially. If I give that user, that visitor, an RFID badge and an escort, then that the badge of that escort or that visitor are going to be a detective control because I know where they're going and I can use my CCTV to watch where they are moving in my environment. So for the exam, you are expected to know the functional order of security controls, and that actually evolved over time. So the functional order of security controls looks like this. I want to deter potential attackers. I want to deny them. If I fail to deny them, I want to detect their activity, and I then want to delay their activity. So even if I can't fully detect them, I need to delay their activity. That's where we have locked doors, for example. And then I want to determine what they're up to and decide how to respond. So you're going to want to know the functional order of security controls. You will want to know the groups or broad categories of physical security controls. We have physical, logical, and administrative. So administrative, think of administrative as the paperwork. That's the policies. Site management, personnel controls, security awareness training, our emergency response and procedures. Logical controls are another category. Another name for logical controls are technical controls. I mentioned it here. So that's the technology, the software and the hardware we use. Access controls on our file systems, intrusion detection, appliances on our network, alarms on our facilities, CCTV monitoring, our environment control like HVAC, heating and air conditioning, power supplies, fire detection and suppression, all technology. Physical controls means anything that's protecting physical controls are what you can touch. Fencing, lighting, locks, that's protecting the physical world. Guards, dogs, access control vestibules. If you are the person who asked me about the difference between a man trap and access control vestibule and something else, I saw you came back with more data. I just haven't had time to go back and revisit your question there, but I will get back to you here in the next few. So know that that's definitely going to come up, and you're going to see these come up in multiple areas. So server rooms, media storage, You're expected to know how to store media securely. Evidence storage is covered in 394. Restricted work area. So how we control access to restricted work areas. We'll talk about restricted areas, air gapping, etc. Audit trails and access logs are useful tools for managing physical access control as well, where we have an area where folks sign in. So in the physical world, when we think about data centers, HVAC is going to come up. So understanding heating and air, conceptually speaking. Disasters, you're expected to know common natural and man-made disasters. Fire suppression comes up. So a lot of these are going to be covered. So yeah, and Tika just mentioned a lot of these are aligned to ISO 27001. Yeah, a lot of these are going to make an appearance in 27001 for sure. And most of your cloud service providers out there, certainly your big three, Amazon, Google, and Microsoft, will all have ISO 27001 certifications. You can download from their website, from some central portal. You can get their SOC 2 audits, etc. Because you typically can't audit those big providers. But the fire classes are called out here. I don't think any major changes here. But you're expected to know those classes of fire and how you put them out for site and facilities. And again, and when it comes to gas discharge systems, what I can tell you is halon's been illegal for a long time. It's still available from recyclers. There are actually companies out there that recycle, so you can get halon if you've got systems that need it. Lots of replacements out there. You don't need to remember all these, but when it comes to gas discharge systems, they tend to be more effective than water discharge, but they are not good in environments where people are located. That's another key element you should remember for the exam, because gas discharge systems work by and large by removing oxygen from the air, which will ruin your weekend and beyond. So for sure, we need clean and consistent power. Know the difference between a generator and a UPS, an uninterruptible power supply. So a UPS is going to give us the ability to shut down cleanly, or to just keep a system running long enough to get over to generator power. And a generator is how we run for extended periods of time. That's really the difference in the two. Voltage might come up. I mean, a lot of these feel like niche topics, don't they? And they are, but they're important in the context of the big picture when you're a security leader and you need to build a functional and secure environment. And again, my money says that site and facility design are maybe a little less relevant today than they were a few years ago, but to the degree we all work in hybrid cloud environments where we have a corporate data center, all of these things still matter. And you may work for an existing employer who has a data center, and as you learn all of these topics for the CISSP exam, I can promise you will begin to unofficially audit your own employer's environment, and you will be looking for these weaknesses, and you will be calling these out to your boss, and you will look smart, and that's great. So all of this, that is to say, all of this is very well worth your time. And I don't know, I found all of these things fairly interesting for what it's worth, because I hadn't really spent a lot of time with them, but it sort of allowed me to overlay my time as we designed a data center with a company to these exam topics. So for the record, I've got a breakout session on this. It's called Physical Security Principles and Controls, and we cover site and facility design in there and all the aspects of physical security. Fairly short video, 35, 40 minutes long. So if this is not an area that you're super familiar with, which I think will be quite a few folks, make sure you have a quick look at that. So I'm going to backtrack for just a moment here. Again, on cryptography, I break these out into chunks for you. Don't go crazy trying to remember all these details. Try to do your best to remember. If I were going to give you a hierarchy of what to remember based on what candidates have told me coming out of the exam, remember which algorithms are still in use. Remember hash length for hash algorithms. Remember their hash length. For encryption algorithms like symmetric algorithms, AES is the gold standard. Block sizes in bits 128 to 256. I would say today, remember that 256 is AES 256 is where you want to be for your key size, because that's going to be the most quantum resistant. But again, don't kill too much time getting into the nitty-gritty details there. Your three major public key crypto systems, you want to be familiar there. And again, know asymmetric and symmetric cryptography very, very well. So a good question here, is the full SHA name going to be provided in the exam, like SHA 512? It could be. I would not at all be surprised. The way I chunk that one, just by the by, they're easy to remember because you'll notice that for the SHA-224 and up, the hash value, because that's a secure hash algorithm, right? The hash length is the same length as in the name. Anything on hybrid encryption? You know, I actually have that in my notes here to see if there's anything specific that's going to come up on the exam. I don't have anything for you there today. That may change as we get closer to April 15, but not much on that today. So I just want to throw a couple of things back up on the screen here. And that is getting down to those chapter mapping. So show of hands here, who has been keeping those chapter mappings handy so you know which chapters in the book map to the domains you're preparing for? Is that something most of you have been doing? Give me a show of hands if the answer is yes. And if you're not, know that I will have that in the it's in every handout that's coming through this series. So know that it is out there for you to look at. But for domain 3, it's chapters 6 through 10. So make sure you keep that sucker handy. I just wanted to throw this up on the screen. Okay. And again, if you have not registered for the online resources before you go out buying third-party, quizzes or flashcards or anything, go register these official resources from the book and look at these resources first before you go spending more money, okay? And if you struggle to get these online resources activated, go to the weekly recap email, because I have a link in there to a short video where I walk you through the process of activating these. I found it a bit complicated, actually, because you have to go to the site and register. You go to the site and generate a PIN, then you go get that PIN out of your email, and you go back to the site, and you have to click on a specific link, but you eventually get here. But as you see, you've got quiz questions in that official study guide and flashcards in that official study guide, right? So that's going to give you some ability to drill down on the chapters in the book. And that's what you're going to, and as well as those flashcards. But remember that if you get that practice test book in the bundle, which only costs like an extra $3, that test bank for the practice test book allows you to drill down a little more easily by domain, because each chapter in the book is a domain. So domain 1 is chapter 1, domain 2, chapter 2, etc. And again, small chunks, my friends, okay? Keep those practice quizzes 30 to 60 minutes long at most, and make sure that you're spacing those out, because the other thing in making sure you get to 90% on those quizzes, don't be memorizing the answers, because once you started to memorize the answers, what value does that quiz have for you at that point? The answer is it has not much value, because you've now memorized all the answers. That's kind of defeating the purpose. So make sure that you do allow for some time to forget the questions themselves. Although you want to remember the concepts, make sure that you space it out a bit. And finally, if you have not spent any time on the mindset, something I would suggest you front load into your exam preparation, and this is where I'm going to leave you today, is with the Think Like a Manager exam. I'm not the only person who's created a Think Like a Manager video. I think this one is very effective. I've had a lot of candidates tell me it is. So I think you should watch that video pretty early on, because it will help shape your mindset in knowing where to focus and where not. So that's where we go. So we are right at the bottom of the hour, my friends. I'm going to stop the recording now. I will look for your questions. And again, check the weekly recap email coming out in a few hours. We'll have the video replay, as well as links to all the video resources, the form where you can ask me your questions. Happy to take any and all questions you bring. And I will see you back here for Domain 4 next week, same time, same place. Any trouble in the interim, you know where to find me. Reach out, and we will talk. Have a good night. Take care.